Like,
Good. Welcome and happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our second panel discussion on a very important topic. This is timed around the upcoming World Biodiversity Day, tomorrow, the 22nd of May. I would like to just briefly frame what we would like to look at and achieve. We have a wonderful group of very interesting, very qualified, very highly engaged individuals to drive this conversation. And we have a great group of co-moderators and some really people in the background who have done an amazing job to really make this possible. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for signing up, registering for this event. We'd love to have you come to us with questions, preferably through the chat function. Make sure you're muted, and you're more than happy to turn on your video so we can also take some snapshots who is here. Setting the scene for what biodiversity or the topic of biodiversity really means is kind of like a book which I picked up a few years ago, where it says no life without biodiversity. And this was published by a gentleman, the name Nick van der Knop, who is a very successful flower grower in the Netherlands. And this biodiversity topic has been obviously not a new wrestling match between agriculture and the interests of conservationists, but it has become an increasingly urgent topic to solve, because we are really running out of time, just like with the climate emergency is hand in hand, that the loss of biodiversity is in such a rapid scale, and it has the indicators showing that it is, really giving us a big problem starting now and in the future. According to FAO 2010 figures, roughly 52% of agricultural land, which is twice the size of China, is moderately or severely degraded. This has a profound impact on why we need to really look at biodiversity. And biodiversity is, of course, a very complex system, and it is implied by many different factors. And when you look at agriculture, how it evolved in the last century and up till now, it is almost a polarized situation, whereas industrialized monocropping is just not possible with a system in tandem of keeping biodiversity at least partially alive or even maintained. And we see these indicators have shown over and over again that it's a continuous decrease of the different species in and around these agriculture areas. So thanks a lot for the panelists to join us here, because it is a really important topic to try to frame. We are currently focused on informing the policymakers and regulators who are in Europe at the moment, really spending a lot of time and efforts to try to figure out a strategy how to implement or increase biodiversity in agriculture. This is the European Union who is taking a bit of a leadership position here. And obviously, this is not a topic which is just EU-based. It's a global topic. And we have also representation here from organizations which are looking at this from a global perspective, because everything in biodiversity is really a global aspect. And this is in itself also a difficult thing for agriculture to understand, because agriculture is mainly a local and regional affair. Farmers do not really have a big global picture. And that is presenting really specific challenges. So I just want to move on and go directly into the introduction of our panelists. This event has been co-organized by Future Food Institute. We find that Future Food Institute and FarmTech Society are extremely compatible organizations, coming from a couple different similar points, but also have some very, very complementing missions. You can visit our website and read about us if you have any questions, or you can reach out to us through the chat. We're more than happy to provide you with information about our activities. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist with the name Kees Arts. Kees is the founder of Protex, which is a company which has evolved into the market leader in alternative protein solutions within insect production. He is also a member of the board of Smart Parks and a member of the Future Council on Food Security in Agriculture at the World Economic Forum. Prior to that, he was a consultant for McKinsey, and he has a degree from TU Delft in aerospace engineering, which I find remarkable. His slogan, I lifted off the website, is "Food in Balance with Nature." Next is Rodrigo Barrios. He's the strategic partnership manager for a wonderful organization called Crop Trust. All of us know that the so-called Doomsday Vault in Norway, where strategically important genetics are stored and built up with this wonderful organization. Prior to being engaged with the Crop Trust, Rodrigo was the advisor of Presidencia del Consejo de Ministerios del Peru and an economic advisor de Espacio Residencial. He was prior to that a consultant and has a degree from the Universidad del Pacífico. I lifted a slogan from his website, which I found also really important to understand the time frame where we're really looking at. And it says here, a 10,000-year legacy we can't leave to chance. I really think this is a very important perspective to have in this whole discussion. Then I want to introduce Tisha Livingston. She is the CEO of Infinite Acres, which creates the state-of-the-art technology available for indoor farming. She's also the president of a company called 80 Acres Farms and a dear board member of the FarmTech Society. Prior to entering this new indoor business, she was the COO of Sagar Creek Vegetables, which is a Del Monte Foods division. And she worked there for a great number of years, also as a VP supply chain and productivity manager. She earned a degree at the University of Cincinnati. Her slogan is "Growing the Future of Food." Then I would like to introduce Sarah Versi. She is the founder of Future Food Institute and a partner and board member of the Food for Climate League. She's also the president of Future Food Network and a member of Energy Sustainability and Climate Task Force of B20 in Saudi Arabia. She's the CEA of a food innovation program and a board member of CAAB, the Agri-Food Center of Bologna. She earned a degree in the European School of Economics. Now, her slogan is, of course, really important to understand as well. It says, "Make exponential positive change in order to sustainably improve life on Earth through education and innovation in the global food systems." Then our guest of honor today is dear Christina Petracci, who is the leader of the FAO e-Learning Academy. And she is basically my hero in terms of really building up the knowledge transfer in agriculture in such an important institution as FAO, where she spent the last 20 years. She earned a PhD in nutrition in La Sapienza University in Rome and has been also a fellowship at the CNR National Research Council of Rome Fellowship. Her slogan is alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. As Christina is not going to be able to stay long for us, and as I thought that it would be a really good setting of the topic, I asked her to briefly introduce the work she's doing for FAO, and with this, I'm going to give her the floor, and then it comes back to me, and we'll come to Mr. Bogovic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you to FarmTech Society and Future Food Institute for the opportunity to share with you what the FAO e-Learning Academy is doing, especially to support sustainability and also biodiversity. I'd like to share with you just very briefly a few of the challenges humanity is faced with. As you know, food insecurity remains one of the main issues. I mean, to provide not only enough, but also the appropriate quality of food for an overgrowing population is still one of the main challenges for humanity. But the issue is not only about increasing production. That would be a very limited way of analyzing food insecurity. It is also a matter of the food losses and waste throughout the food value chains. As you know, there are huge amounts of food wasted and lost throughout the food value chains. It's about also food systems which need to be more inclusive, integrated, performant, and especially which put back at the center the environment and the nutritional and health status of citizens. So this remains still a challenge. Of course, also the loss of biodiversity, the consequences of the behavior of men and the climate change that is part of the consequences also have an impact also on the loss of biodiversity, as you know. But also the management of natural resources remains also one of the challenges that humanity is confronted with. I have to say that also gender discrimination and inequalities also has a huge impact and the lack of access to food, to education, to financial resources, to the same services, and to decision making is also creating imbalances and has an impact globally. But also child labor, youth employment, and of course, as COVID teaches us, human and animal diseases remain also one of humanity's part of humanity's greatest challenges. What we really need actually is competent professionals which are able and capable of formulating the appropriate programs, taking the appropriate decisions, formulating the appropriate policies. And that is exactly the objective of the FAO e-Learning Academy. The FAO e-Learning Academy's objective is to try to transfer skills and competences. I really would like to focus on the word competences. And I will be explaining a little bit how we do this. And the idea is we are aligned with all of the SDGs, and in particular SDG 4, universal education for anyone, anywhere, at any time. We try to provide these resources free of charge, multilingual, and they're offered as a global public good. So this is the link if you want to visit the FAO e-Learning Academy, but I have to also mention that this is not the result only of FAO's work. FAO has been working with over 200 partners for the creation of these resources, for the dissemination, for the language adaptation and localization of these resources throughout the world. And so far we have reached 700,000 learners. And what I wanted to mention is the thematic areas. So as you know, sustainability, biodiversity are concepts which need to be basically approached using an integrated approach, because they are quite complex and multidimensional. So what we try to do, we try to provide courses which are aimed at specific professional profiles, and they aim to develop specific competences in a number of thematic areas. So for example, in climate change, climate smart agriculture, but also nutrition and sustainable food systems, management of natural resources, soils restorations, forest restorations, management of water, trade, investments, markets, analysis, and also, for example, we have series of courses on crop improvement. So how to basically, all the pre-breeding, so how to basically integrate in some species other genes which belong to other species in order to provide different characteristics, maybe improve their resistance to drought, etc. So how to maintain gene banks, how to, for gene bank curators, how to manage these gene banks, how to create new species, and how to maximize biodiversity, genetic biodiversity, and preserve it. So these, of course, food safety and other thematic areas. We also have courses on the ecosystems approaches to fisheries. So always the idea to have an integrated approach to the thematic area. I also wanted to mention that FAO is custodian of 21 of the SDG indicators. And for these indicators, what has been done was really a huge effort, because we worked with all the countries globally to define the methodologies for these indicators, the methodologies to collect, to analyze, to interpret, to monitor, and to report on these indicators. And so this has been done collaboratively. The validation has been done collaboratively worldwide. And then we have developed these courses that help countries step by step into how to basically collect and analyze and monitor those specific indicators. And among these indicators, of course, we have conservation of plant and animal genetic resources. This is one of the courses, but also water use and efficiency, forests, sustainable forests, of course, and forest management, etc. So these are among the SDG indicator courses that FAO has also developed. I also wanted to mention that in all these courses, there are 3 common threads. The first common thread is gender sensitivity throughout. So to ensure a gender sensitivity, not only in the content and the approaches, but also in the scenarios, in the case studies, in the imagery, in the photographs, in all. So gender sensitivity is one of the cross-cutting issues. The second one is sustainability. We make sure that sustainability is really at the core of all these different courses. And then the third one is, the third common thread is innovation. Innovation in all its possible meanings. Innovation in the practices, in the methodologies, in the approaches, but innovations also, innovation in the pedagogical models and different delivery solutions that we propose. Just before describing a little bit the pedagogical models that we use, I wanted to share with you 3 important resources on biodiversity that FAO has. So the first one is, there is a specific website in FAO dedicated to biodiversity. So it's very easy. It's the first one. The other resource where you can find a huge number of valuable resources on biodiversity, on the approaches, etc. The second one that is really worth mentioning is the State of Wales Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture. This is really one of the flagship publications at FAO, There have been over 91 countries contributing to this, and over 175 experts that have contributed. So that is really one of the key publications that could be shared with you. So you have here the link. And also I wanted to share with you, we have the family farming knowledge platform of FAO, which is also where you can find also this integrated approach to biodiversity. And this is the link where you can have access to the resources. Very quickly, I also wanted to mention that we work with 4 types of organizations. So I told you we work with over 200 partners throughout the world. We work with 4 types of organization. The first type is UN and development agencies. We work a lot with regional organizations like NEPAD, ECOWAS, COMESA, SILS, etc., but also with other UN. The EU is, for example, and all of these are integrating our courses within their capacity development programs on sustainability and biodiversity. We also work with the International Federation of Red Cross, and basically this is one type of organization. The second type of organization is universities and academic institutions. We have created a number of master's and postgraduate degrees where they use and incorporate our courses within their offerings, university offerings. So this is the second type. The third is NGOs and CSOs, where they use the courses to train their staff to develop their capacities. And we are noticing that private sector is now also very interested in these courses. This is some of the UN initiatives and networks we're working with, but this is might be interesting for you, which is a little bit out of the 700,000 learners. This is the distribution by type of organization. This is also speaks to us a lot, because 20% are from university, but 15% are governments. So governments are actually using these resources to formulate policies, to do policy reform. So they are pretty much integrated into national contexts. Very, very briefly, I just wanted to mention, I was mentioning innovation, and I mentioned innovation not only in the content of the courses and in the methodologies and in the concepts and approaches, but also methodology, innovation in the pedagogical models that we offer. This is very important. It is very important to diversify your delivery methods, your pedagogical models in order to have a higher impact and better results. And this is what we have noticed in the years, that the more you integrate different learning methodologies, and the greater is the impact. So we combine different models. We, as I mentioned, we do self-paced, we do university programs. Some programs are completely mobile compatible. Some other methods that we use are MOOCs, certified blended learning programs, online technical webinars. And in all of these, we try to use different methods such as storytelling, scenario-based, where we use realistic scenarios, live interviews, learning by doing. So we try to also diversify the pedagogical methodologies that are used. And now I go back to the concept of competences, and I will be concluding. I mentioned in order to face all the challenges humanity is facing, it is crucial to have competent professionals. But it is also very crucial to be able to demonstrate that you have acquired those competences. So since 2020, we have started with a new system, which is the online digital badge system, which is a system that allows to certify the acquisition of competences. So this is not just to certify that you finished a course or that you know about biodiversity, but it is actually to certify that you have acquired the specific competences on that thematic area. This is also an extremely powerful tool to be able to match professional profiles and competences to employment opportunities. So these badges are being used worldwide in private sector. They're used in the UN and big NGOs. And we are also using them because once you earn them, they follow you in your LinkedIn, in your e-portfolio, in your CV. It becomes part of your pool of competences that you can demonstrate to have. So these digital badges are earned if you pass a scenario-based, competency-based test at the end of the course. And these are some of the badges that we have developed for some of our courses. These are the ones for the SDG indicators that we have developed. And these are some of the publications that we have produced. They are all available on our website. So I would like to thank you all very, very much for this opportunity to share with you a little bit what we do and how important it is to basically try to achieve basically the conservation of biodiversity and sustainability through the transfer of competences, because at the end of the day, this is what we need. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And yes, the knowledge transfer is a very critical part of this equation of trying to move forward in the agenda of reaching those climate goals and biodiversity goals. And in agriculture in general, agriculture is one sector who's been underserved in many ways and shape and form, with availability to actually integrated learning programs. So thank you very much. I want to switch over now to a dear supporter of our initiative, Frank Bogovic, who is a member of the European Parliament. He is from Slovenia and he cannot be here live, so he pre-recorded a short keynote, and then we'll dive into our questions with the panelists. So please, Matteo, start the video. Thank you. There's no sound. Matteo, there's no sound.
Implement things which we spoke about and what we voted about. And in agriculture, CAP policy, we all know that these topics about biodiversity and other things are very important, and it's necessary not only to speak about this, but also to offer practical solution. And I met with some of you also in past, and I really like this debate when we speak about possibilities, about good practices, and I think that sometimes I miss this when we get on the table proposals like biodiversity strategy. It's necessary to implement it. And now I think that we know that now these trialogues can start, and inside these trialogues, it will be necessary to accept first this CAP policy on the European level, and then accept strategic plans on national level and find these goals. And through this, I think this innovation, new way of producing, or what you are working on, this controlled environment, are one of the possibility. I think very important thing, and it is a part of also possibility that we get support for this innovation, digitalization, good use of resources there. I think that we are in close to many these topics which are inside CAP. So as perhaps you know, I work also on this topic on smart villages, and this is how digital gap, to fulfill digital gap also in rural areas, and through such innovation things, I think that we can also go in this direction. Less use of pesticides, other things. In many things, we are connected with these possibilities you offer. So I will not waste your time. It's a pleasure that I can be co-host with you, and the floor give back to you, Tom, and I wish a good meeting.
Well, thanks. Thanks also for your patience, audience, please. I want to just jump right into our co-moderator team, Stanislaus Mestier, who is the legal counsel, and he's also a account manager for Whom Bropi, and is leading our moderating team. Then we have also Nicole Thorpe, who is a dear board member from FarmTech Society, as well as a board member at the UK UAT, and she's a business owner, started a company called Cultinova in Munich. And finally, also we have a new member on our team, Clément Cardon, who is our agriculture policy advisor, who just finished his master's degree in Science Po. So I'm going to hand over to the team. Any questions, intermissions, please put that in the chat, and I'm looking forward to a very lively debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'd just like to dive straight in without further ado and ask the panel about what role do you think controlled environment agriculture can play in making agricultural food production more biodiversity friendly? Anyone? Tisha, maybe start with you.
Yeah, sure, Nicole. Thank you. So, you know, CEA is a technology where we can grow local food for local. So we are able to be more sustainable with our water usage. We absolutely require 0 pesticides to be able to grow this food. It also is enabling bringing the technology and the love for food, or the knowledge of where your food comes from, back to the local municipalities. We're able to create food security within the regions where we operate. And we're really able to give, and we also can grow food vertically and indoors with higher yields, which enable us to have less land that is needed to be required to be able to grow to feed the population. Does anybody agree with me or disagree?
Thank you, Tisha.
Are there other things?
Thank you, Tisha. Any other opinions? I think you've summed it up really, really well, Tisha, and I think this topic is also, from a business sense, an extremely important one. I'll hand over to my co-moderator, Stanislav, for the next question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question quite in the same line to Sarah, as you know, part of the Future Food Institute. How do you see controlled environment agriculture as a solution to, you know, it's not a panacea to all biodiversity issues, but how do you see it as a possible solution to certain aspects?
I'm sure that controlled environment agriculture can be one of the strongest tools we have now, because we have been complaining for decades, but now technology is available. And we all know that the challenges we are going to face in the next decades ahead are going to be huge overall in terms of climate change and issues related to water shortage and desertification in many parts of the world. If I'm thinking about the Mediterranean area, for example, I'm talking now from Polica, the capital of the Mediterranean diet, in the middle of the Mediterranean basins. And here we know that in the next decades ahead, we are at very high risk of desertification. What does it mean for us? Does it mean that probably we're going to lose many of our crops and iconic biodiversities? We know that now with the technology, we can probably solve this issue, or at least try to achieve the goals, reducing the use of natural resources, optimizing the way we are producing. So I see that are huge potentials to increase the adoptions of technologies and, of course, using it in a proper way.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to ask Kees as well. You know, a similar question. Of course, you're the founder of Protix, with working with alternative proteins. It's kind of the same innovation in agriculture as we see with CEA. How do you see the role of these more innovative forms of production answer some of the questions around sustainability, and in this case, maybe biodiversity specifically?
Thank you for the question. And I actually have a slide I can put on screen for a moment, if you like. Give me 1 second. No.
Yeah.
This one. How do I get to the PowerPoint? Here, there it is. So maybe to show you a little bit the state of an innovative business like Protix, because controlled environment agriculture and vertical farming has been spoken a lot about, of course, but there's actually in the entire world very few very productive vertical farm environments. There's still a lot at the PowerPoint or at the pilot stage. And what you see here is a 15,000 square meter, and we convert 70,000 ton of organic byproducts and material from the food system, and we upgrade that to 15 to 20,000 ton of insect biomass. And then from those insects, we extract the proteins and lipids, and basically what we do, and that's our vision, food in balance with nature, whereby the larvae brings the food system in balance with nature, yin yang, by using all the outputs of the food system, and that can be supermarket waste, food waste, ethanol byproduction, beer byproduction, but you have all these side streams coming from the food system after you harvest something or you catch something, right? So basically the whole food system is a square meter of land being harvested, or it's a cubic meter of water being fished and hunted for. So that's literally the entire shell that produces the organic matter we need in our food system. So if you follow the material, then there is a consumption at the end. There's a conversion in the middle. Sometimes it's called soy to pig feed to pig meat to a piece of meat on your plate. Sometimes it's soy to hexane extraction to a texturizer to a plant burger alternative with all kinds of additives. So the big food system is a conversion engine. And that, of course, that conversion engine is the issue, because principally there's quite a lot of carbohydrates, proteins, and fiber produced. It's the conversion and losses that add up to that we need too much. And that's where the insects can come in, because we can take nearly all the outputs and we convert it back into building blocks. So instead of food residues that are in many ways sometimes still landfilled, but in other worse ways being digested or incinerated into energy, what we basically do, we upcycle it in high quality building blocks for any participant in the food system. So you can imagine pets, fish, shrimp, chicken, humans, but also plants, all in need of building blocks like protein meals, lipids, oils, vitamins. And this category of insects has never been used. So insects as a source of nutrition has never really been used in our food system. When I was young, I used it for reptiles and for angling and fishing, but we did not structurally use it as a source of nutrition. We sometimes refer, of course, to areas where on a market you can buy some insects, but still it's actually relatively small, the amount that is used, but insect as a source of nutrition is only very new. And what we see happening, and this is where controlled environment agriculture and vertical farm systems come in, is that in the end, we're all footprintarians, so not vegetarians or flexitarians, but we're footprintarians. So whatever we consume in terms of products, services, goods, and experiences has a footprint. And we want that footprint to go down. And you can do that by asking businesses and governments to create new products, services, goods, and experiences at a lower footprint. But that's your choice, your change. And then there are companies and businesses that need to drive it further down behind. So if you, for instance, go from red meat to plant or red meat to white meat, then you still want the production of that white meat and plant to be produced as sustainably as possible. And if I go then to how we do that, for instance, I won't bore you too much with all the technology, then we can produce that in a vertical farm system. And I'm going to give you the number. Our production capacity is 10,000 tons of protein per hectare per year. So 10,000 tons of protein per hectare per year, that's equivalent to almost 5,000 hectares on primary production of edible protein, edible and digestible protein. So that's, I think, the ultimate number where vertical farm systems start to have impact, because as you can see this image, this factory is super automated. I mean, you cannot believe how automated this is. This is 12 layers that is continuously managing biomass and metabolic energy. And this is not a PowerPoint. We're actually producing at that scale, which is quite radical, because the insect industry and vertical farm systems are often still at their PowerPoint or pilot stage. So we know what it takes to manage such an intense amount of biomass and conversion energy, because metabolic energy is pretty cool, actually. If we today we had a team session again. A couple of years ago, we underestimated it sometimes, and when that is released without control, you would have, I mean, it's like literally you superheat the factory within an hour. So it's vertical farm systems are not easy. It demands a lot of control systems, data management, environmental control systems. But once you have it under control, it is extremely efficient, because of all of that, we can produce even more than 70%. So if you take butter, for instance, plant-based butter based on oil is already more sustainable. But with insect butter, we can drive down the footprint by even further 70% down. And the same we can do with proteins. And it's because of the efficiency, because of the biological conversion. And now we're going to expand this. But vertical farm, so enabling vertical farm systems, whether that's for insects or plant or microbiology or algae in the future, I don't think it will be easy to get close to 10,000 tons per hectare per year. I know that algae do about 100 or 200, maybe 300. Mm-hmm. But we do 10,000. It's pretty cool.
Thank you very much. And you know, the efficiency that you talk about and you know, taking off the pressure from more traditional forms of farming is especially also what CEA tries to do. So thanks for that. About the energy intensity that we briefly touched upon, Kees, I'd like to ask a follow-up question to Tisha. Basically, you know, CEA has this, as we discussed, this, you know, take away pressure on traditional farming. A critique that sometimes we hear is that it is quite energy intensive. How would you react to that? What are your first thoughts about that? And how do you see, you know, rolling out CEA to a greater scale? What impact that would have on energy systems, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a question that every time I look to speak to someone about building a vertical farm, that is one of the first questions, is the amount of energy that's required to be able to operate these farms. And what I would tell you is, just in the 6 years that I've been in the space, you're seeing that the equipment, typically the LED lights, that are driving the majority of the energy usage, you're seeing that they're driving more and more efficacy when you think about grams per mole. And so you're seeing the technology catch up and continuing to improve. But the fact of the matter is that you still use a lot of energy in food production with vertical farms. What I would say is that vertical farms have a very interesting place within the energy grid, particularly with renewable energy. They are a large offtake of renewable energy, but you can manage the usage, and you can manage and balance the grid, if you will, to be able to make highly efficient renewable energy grids and be able to take that to really help solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing in renewable energy right now. So I think that while we are a big user, in some cases, that's exactly what you need in certain places.
Great, thank you, Tisha.
One follow-up. comment also to Keith, your presentation. You mentioned controlled environment agriculture. I mean, I want to point out too that controlled environment agriculture is a very broad field that would certainly be inclusive of your operation, Keith, and insect protein, which is an exciting field. I think there's a lot of great opportunities for complementary approaches as we look at protein as an essential aspect, obviously, of food security, as well as the precision nutrition that plant production in these environments can offer. Certainly there's the emerging field of vertical farming, growing crops in artificial light, but also included in the definition of controlled environment agriculture, CEA. It was a 250,000 hectares of greenhouse production just in Europe. Mostly vine crops. You also have cultivation of microorganisms, increasingly significant as we look at new ways of carbon sequestration in soil, healthy soil, nutraceuticals. So it's a very broad field. And I think one of the things as we look at the many applications that's important to focus on, especially as we think from a global perspective in developing regions, is that CEA is really about using technology judiciously and in an appropriate way based on geography, based on the infrastructure that's available to secure the value chain and also to make critical value chains more climate proof. But I also want to point out, as we talk about technology, certainly an important part of the debate is what technologies, what level of technology are going to be appropriate to both infrastructure and technical training in any given region. I think the presentation by Christina as well, what the FAO is doing as well is really important. Aquaculture, another critical area of controlled environment agriculture, recirculating aquaculture as well. So just want to point out the broadness of the field. Keith, I would encourage you and Protex to also, identify as controlled environment agriculture an important piece of it as well, whether it's for better feed for animals, whether you're talking to people that are ready to embrace insects in the diet, or create more sustainable sources for animal feed. I just think it's an exciting ecosystem, and these types of discussions are really great as we think about.
Thanks, Ian. Ian is our chairman and intersecting here. What about Rodrigo? We should ask him a good question. Huh?
Yeah, I've got a question for Rodrigo, and thank you, Ian. This variety was quite a good segue into my question for Rodrigo. Rodrigo, as the strategic partnership manager of the Crop Trust, you work quite a lot and put quite a lot of significance on crop conservation, and so I was wondering, where do you see the potential or role of controlled environment agriculture in terms of increasing crop conservation or crop diversity?
Hi everybody. So I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So as you may know, I don't know how many of you know about the Crop Trust, but we are one of the few organizations that have the mandate of contributing to long-term conservation of crop diversity. So this is a crucial year for the international conversation on biodiversity. We have the CBD Conference of the Parties coming soon, as well as Glasgow and the UN Food System Summit. And there's always this negative juxtaposition of agriculture and biodiversity, and how agriculture is really contributing to land degradation, contributing to fragile ecosystems, and of course, genetic erosion and biodiversity depletion. And usually this interrelation is being seen from the lens of wildlife and how the agricultural boundary is really pushing or limiting the space for ecosystems to work as they have been naturally intended to do so. But an equally harrowing crisis that we're facing is also genetic erosion within agriculture. And there is according to some estimates, we have 75% of varieties lost in only the last century of crops. So the Crop Trust is working to ensure that what is left is safeguarded sustainably. So that being said, we usually work with research facilities and gene banks globally that if they have breeding programs or agricultural programs in general, they are of course focused on the field. We don't really have any big involvement on CEA. But what I do have to say is, you know, to some extent, agrobiodiversity and agrobiodiversity driven agricultural systems are kind of a natural CEA. You know, agrobiodiversity makes so much sense in this transition towards agroecology. It is using locally adapted crops where they have been historically grown, where they have proved to be uniquely resilient, and where you actually find that rich pool of genetic traits in neglected and underutilized species or varieties of staple crops that exist within specific ecosystems globally. So actually, by using agrobiodiversity more efficiently, you are not only contributing to more sustainable agriculture, but also to better biodiversity practices. So just having said that, we do have one experience working with FarmShelf. So FarmShelf is a startup that is based out of the US, and FarmShelf does vertical farming. And it was kind of like a success story, but one of the chefs in our network actually rescued some heritage varieties of lettuces that hadn't been grown in the US since almost the American Independence War. And this lettuces actually carry unique traits that made them extremely drought resilient. And they brought them back to FarmShelf. And actually FarmShelf, now that it's being installed in different restaurants and different even households in the US, people are growing this varieties of lettuces once again. So I think agrobiodiversity can play a role also in CEA. It's a matter of building those bridges and understanding how we can complement both worlds sustainably.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that really comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Thanks. Also, building bridges, I think, is very interesting, because there's this two other discussions that I feel bridges can be drawn between, which is climate change and biodiversity loss. You've touched really quickly on the CBD COP15 in China in November, I think it's coming up. And there is going to be some interesting questions. And some of the questions I've seen pass by have been about this, how do we, find a sort of marriage between protecting biodiversity through strict targets, maybe, producing effectively our food, and dealing with climate change adaptation. And that brings me back to Sarah, having talked earlier about the Southern Europe and the challenges they face with drought. And I'm just wondering, Sarah or anyone else, how you see the role of CEA in both dealing with adapting to climate change and then having this environmental side to it, saving space for biodiversity, and how big do you think this niche can become? Sarah first, or there we go.
I strongly believe that regeneration in this area can only happen if we're going to be able to change our mindset. And I think that mindset and approach are the key pillar and the key tool we need all to use, even if we are in science, even if we are in tech, even if we are in education and so on. So of course, if we talk about control environment agriculture, this is part of innovation, is a tool for innovation, is a pillar of agri-tech innovation. And we have the technology, but we need to change our software, the way we are using the technology. So it can only happen if we change our approach to the topic of ecology. At Future Food, we are really working a lot on that, trying to educating business people, executives, young innovators, kids in schools, families, the broader society, really developing a different approach to ecology. When we talk about ecology and we have under our radar the sustainable development frameworks, we need to think about ecology connecting the different 5 or 6 approaches: economic ecology, environmental ecology, political ecology, cultural ecology, human ecology, of course, also social and environmental ecology. So controlled environment agriculture is an amazing tool, but we need to change the way we are implementing our lifestyle and making innovation and making and designing business strategies and political strategies. For sure, there is so much we have to do to address this issue at all the different levels. So talking with policymakers to advance also political decisions that can facilitate the adoptions of technologies like this one. But those political decisions must also support education in the sector, facilitating people not only to use the technology, but to use it in the proper way, in the good sense, and to measure the impact we are able to do. So I think that there is a huge potential, and I'm a very positive person, so I strongly believe that we can make it and we can implement regenerative business models. I think that technology can be absolutely a tool that we need all to learn how to use even more. But I also think that we need to invest a lot in educating the broader society and making also the cultural shift, because now we are all talking about the ecological transition. I know that we have also to lead not only the ecological transition and the digital transition, but also a cultural transition, because all of them goes hand by hand, and we need to implement a much deeper systemic approach.
That's leading me to a question like the systemic view is leading me to the question of an economic view. Okay, so that'd be one for you. I'd like to ask you, how economically viable do you think controlled environment agriculture is especially in your area in terms of the high capex and operational costs?
It was for me?
Yeah, if you,
yeah, sorry.
Then I can. You guys
well, it's basically an innovation cycle, right? So our next facility will already be about double the productivity for about 30% less capex. And once you go to technology, these scale factors will start to be implemented. That's why I think that the controlled environment agriculture and farming holds one of the biggest opportunities for the future, right? It's really where you can start applying engineering, R&D, innovation, all bringing it together into extremely productive systems. It's basically, it's almost like an equal jump from acreage to greenhouses. If you look at the productivity of tomatoes in greenhouses in the Netherlands, it's just off the charts. I mean, sometimes we already reach 800 tons per hectare per year. That was unheard of 50 to 60 years ago. We're going to make an equal mega jump, and it's because everything is so concentrated. Also, the brain power becomes concentrated on to innovate. If I see what we are already doing, so if I look 12 months back on the productivity internally in our conversion of the insect growth in our egg production. It's just amazing. And that's all because we have plastic engineers, automation engineers, software developers, data analytics. And once that all converges, hardware, software, digital, around a biological principle, then CapEx is actually manageable, because per ton of our output, it's acceptable.
And how did you find it difficult to access capital? Well,
it's always difficult in being the first, right? So if you're now an insect company, so I started 11 years ago, but if you're now an insect company, you can far easily get capital, because we create a lot of ground. I mean, when I started, there were 5 legislative frameworks prohibiting me from doing this.
How did you overcome those barriers then?
Sorry?
How did you overcome those barriers back then, if you as one of the pioneers?
Well, first of all, you need to ignore them, and then just go faster. But no, we had a good environment in the Netherlands with a very big influence also in the agricultural European Union. So you basically start lobbying, you start explaining that the regulatory framework never thought about availability of safe ingredients based on insects. So all these regulatory frameworks all based on the same thing. They need to protect a certain, it's called food safety. So basically it starts with food safety. So before you can sell something, you need to prove it's safe. And then there are all other regulations to make sure that it remains a little bit controllable, like manure regulation, or like if you extract a protein in a super pure form, you really want to make sure it's not included in too high a concentration in a food, because a kid could actually get very, very sick from a too high protein product. So all these regulatory frameworks are there for a reason. Sometimes they're a little bit overprotective for vested interests. So that's why you have to get a little bit careful. But in principle, they're there to protect you. So if you can prove that your innovation doesn't pose any health risk, and that it subsequently has economic potential and ecological impacts in the positive sense, then regulations change rapidly. So it took 4 years. So you need to have the stamina and budget to do that. But we basically just flipped them down one by one. So now we've just got 5 new pieces of regulation in the EU that allow us to produce at scale, to sell to food as food, nutrition, and ingredients, and to sell as ingredients for aquaculture.
So Nicole, I have to jump in. Sorry, and I know that we're probably running out of time, but when I think about the technology and the technology development, that's awesome. But I think the thing that CEA also offers is it offers a solution that the consumer wants. Because when you think about, we can come up with the best technology, we can come up with the best widget, but if people aren't willing to buy it and place value on it, then it doesn't really do any good. And what we can find with CEA, what we do with vertical farming is we are able to produce the freshest produce, pesticide-free, that uses less water, is grown sustainably, and you can grow local for local. And people want local. People don't want their food traveling all over the world, being flown and trucked, because the food doesn't last in your fridge, and throwing away food, filling the landfill with food is one of the biggest issues we have. Our country, our world can grow enough food, but we can't get it to people's plate. We can't get it into people's house. And all of the food waste through our supply chain is a huge issue. And when we think about biodiversity, we think about ecology, we think about the problems that we have, a lot of it is just wasted food. It's fertilizer requirements, it's runoff. So they work very closely together, because we have consumers that want fresh, they want local, and we can eliminate a lot of the waste within the supply chain through CEA. So not only are we doing things better for the world, doing better things for the earth, but we're also doing better in providing a more resilient food supply to people in a healthier way, that's grown in an ecological friendly way. So I think that we can talk about the technology of it, and that's awesome. I'm a technology provider, but I'm telling you that food production and having people that want to buy that food because they know that it's healthier for them, they know it's better for the earth, is really what we need to be focused on.
Thank you.
And the sustainably produced, locally produced, that brings us back to the idea that CEA can really happen anywhere, the middle of a city, and that is, again, to bring it back to the biodiversity question, or the idea that we had starting this conversation, being we lessen the impact of food production on biodiversity and on land. However, and this was a question from Facebook, not the Facebook. However, that is an indirect impact, and the question we got asked is, do we also see a direct impact that CEA can offer, or that we see through controlled environment agriculture technology on biodiversity? And I would give that question to Rodrigo.
Yes, so it's a very good question. Of course, for us in the conservation world, conservation in the end makes no sense if there is no use attached to biodiversity, and it goes, you know, both ways. Use doesn't make any sense, or cannot happen if there's no conservation. And an issue that we in the conservation world face consistently is the fact that food companies, agricultural companies are usually far removed from the conservation angle. They tend to see, you know, the value chain from farm to table, and they miss the initial link, which is from seed to farm, which sometimes is even more crucial. You know, seed security is a crucial thing for farmers globally. So what I do see from CEA and the example of this you know, traditional lettuce I gave a few minutes ago is a clear sign of this. CEA can help rekindle that connection of consumers, you know, of growing their own food in their own houses, and can also help trigger a new demand for more diverse seeds. And, you know, in the end, demand is what drives seed saving efforts globally. Demand is what makes companies such as Unilever and Kellogg's, and, you know, the big food companies who start investing also in seed conservation and seed saving efforts. So I mean, CEA can play as a crucial role in reconnecting consumers with the raw material of agriculture, which is seed diversity and the pool of genetic traits of this crops. So yeah, I definitely see a huge interrelation. I would love to hear of other panelists and their views on this, but yeah.
Well, it's a discussion, so let's give, you know, does anyone have an idea top of their head on this? I don't want to throw anyone onto the bus, of course. Nobody? Tisha or Christina, or does anyone have any other ideas? Otherwise, we can go on to further questions. So currently, CEA is still considered quite a niche market. It is still a niche market if we look at it economically, of course. And if we look at the real potential it would have on land sparing, we can see that today, well, you know, the impact is quite limited. How do you see, or anyone, it's kind of an open question to the panel, how do you see the further development of CEA? How big do you think it can become in terms of having not only an economical impact, but especially an environmental impact? Of course, it's always going to be one of many solutions to saving land, saving biodiversity, and having an environmental impact. But, you know, how big can it be quite practically? And then especially considering land sparing, considering that we're in Europe and we're tiny and we don't have that much land to throw away. Yes, Kiss.
So the two ways of looking at big, one is, of course, it can be equally big as the current entire agriculture, because I think there's no limit to the dry matter productivity of the system. So it's purely a replacement potential in its fullest potential, because the energy cost will be lower than basically what is now the solar cost plus the distribution. So I don't think there's a limit to that. But there's something else. What if regions start seeing it as a security? So because of the volatility in climate patterns, so the natural production of food and agriculture is starting to become more and more risky. So from volatility becomes an availability, and so risk management as opposed to availability is basically security. So from flowing that, then the value of it can even be bigger than the entire current agriculture system, because there's an additional price to it. So this is where the consumer doesn't necessarily need to see the difference, because the consumer will see additional benefits over the current agricultural system, like local, like controlled environment, like no pesticides or whatever. Those are added value for the consumer, like Tisha mentioned. But on the production side, I think the potential, I mean, it's It's almost, there's another example which I like a lot. A friend of mine, it's two friends of mine have an electric bike brand, Van Move and Quick. And I know them already for 10 years. And we always said, look, electric biking is much bigger than biking. It's much bigger. And even in the Netherlands, that's difficult to claim, huh? Because we buy like 2 bikes a year every year. So, but it is becoming bigger because it's actually doing more than a bike ever could, right? It's replacing parts of the car. So sometimes an industry can be bigger than what it replaces. So in this can actually be bigger.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm seeing that in my own marketplace where we're selling produce at CEA, we're lifting category in the retailers, because when people taste food that's local and fresh, and they know that it's more nutritious and it doesn't include pesticides, they eat more of it. And so when you think about this healthy eating and you think about being local for local, beyond all of the things around the food miles. When I'm in the US, we also are building things in Europe and around the globe. But when I think about lettuce going from California to Ohio and traveling 11 days en route before it gets to my grocery store, that's a crazy thing. And in 5 years, I can tell you that lettuce is not going to be coming from Salinas, California. One, because they can't support it with the amount of water that they're using. And the runoff and all of the other issues that they have, but also consumers are going to be demanding something different. There's this pent-up demand for fresh produce. There's a pent-up demand for health and nutrition. And you see that with the pandemic, exactly what Kays was talking about with food security. When the ports are closed and people can't go into work to be able to provide food. We have a very resilient supply chain where food is concerned, but it's very specialized. When you see changes in things like with all of the restaurants closing and then all of a sudden the retailers being overwhelmed with demand, our food supply and our supply chain wasn't flexible enough to change from one thing to the next. So we need to be able to have more local production. There's tons of food waste during COVID, and there were plenty of empty shelves. So things are changing. They are looking for more resilience. They're looking for more flexibility, and we're looking for better produce, because we see that. We see the category lifting, people eating more fresh food when it's available to them and it tastes great.
I'm curious now that we, obviously we're laying out all the multiple benefits, and this, it seems to me as though the industry is moving out of its infancy into a more established thing that's here to stay as an integral part of our food systems. I'm wondering, how do we future-proof it in terms of, skills? Do we have the skilled workforce? Do we have the right educational setting? How do we go about that? Kind of securing the next generation of indoor agriculture. Maybe that's a quick one for Kees.
Well, I can name so many things. So I was a math teacher before, so I always say there's no problem that cannot be solved by teaching and education, because that's where it starts. So future-proofing anything starts with education and schooling. Sadly, that is a problem, I think, especially after last year, where a lot of people actually went back to homeschooling for many ways. So that would be a part. Training, availability of technology, more heavy investments. So future-proofing. I think it's like with the development curve of any new industry. I don't think it will be much different. So all of a sudden there will be an inflection point. There will be capex will be so efficient that the investment returns are better than the alternative. So actually, I think we can't. Yeah, I always try to accelerate it faster than the usual trends, but I think it is going in the right way, in my view.
Yeah, what I see, Nicole, is I see that there isn't a book for it out there. We are in a brave new world with no playbook. So the people standardization and being able to really start defining what we mean and what's important in vertical farming or CEA, what are the key drivers to success, and then micro-credentialing and training around those key drivers, around the plant science, food science piece, the technology piece, as well as just good business fundamentals are going to be key. And so that's where we rely on FAO and FFI and Harrisburg University and all the others to help create the playbook. We have to create it as an industry, and we really need to get around it and standardize what we're talking about, so we all are speaking from one voice and we can build up this workforce. Because it is very different. You cannot bring the greenhouse industry into vertical farming and expect it completely to be successful, because it's different. And that might be an unpopular thing to say, but it is. And so we need the groups and the smart people around us to really build out that credentialing so that we forward and we can advance, because our industry is only going to be able to advance as fast as we can bring the rest of the people along to be able to operate in these factories and innovate and bring new diversity of ideas. So education is going to be huge.
Totally, I totally agree. Just wondering, Sarah, you're involved in education as well. I'm just wondering if you had a quick comment on this as well. She's still with us? I seem to have lost her. Okay. I was just wondering, this is a bit of a maybe unexpected question, but kind of going back to the biodiversity angle now. It was Bee Day yesterday, International Bee Day. I'm curious, and this is a question for Rodrigo. Where do you see the overlap between CEA and, obviously apart from insect production and the conservation of insects, or maybe potentially the use of insects, beneficial insects?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we so the Crop Trust originated from FAO, and we work closely with the CGIAR, and I think we're kind of victims and perpetrators at the same time of this siloed policy world. Of course, our expertise is crops, and until recently we hadn't really been working closely with the other communities working in other types of agro-biodiversity. And yeah, it's not only because of lack of will, it's also because the definitions around agro-biodiversity were limited to the crop and to the livestock systems, which usually are not conversing frequently. We're trying to change that, because there's a lot of elements of crop diversity such as temperate and tropical forages and other types of varieties that actually are crucial to livestock agricultural systems as well. But this whole conversation on insects, and also not only insects but also the biota, the microbiome within the soil, is a core element of agricultural biodiversity, perhaps even the most important of all. So this conversation, just what I would like to say is this conversation is just starting. We're starting to see those interlinks and between the crops that we're trying to safeguard in the fields, the agricultural systems that we're trying to promote through agroecology, and other efforts that other organizations are doing, for example, for the conservation of pollinators and insects. And basically, I would say my conclusion is we need more work and more conversation in this aspect. But my main conclusion is agrobiodiversity in all its forms, including insects, including pollinators, is a prerequisite. It's fundamental for the agroecological transition. We cannot transition with just imported varieties of crops, imported insects. I know that, for example, in the Salinas Valley in California, they're importing bees on a daily basis in trucks. This is, of course, a consequence of how much we have been ignoring the locally adapted species within ecosystems, and I'm referring specifically to the agricultural species that have developed over the course of 10,000 years. So I think that insect diversity and crop diversity will play a crucial role in this new vision of agriculture, whether it's in CAA or in agroecological practices in the field.
If I may add just one thing, I think also that the competences that we need to develop here are quite complex, and I think that the only way to succeed is to use also a collaborative approach, and this is exactly what we have been doing. I mean, what I wanted to mention is that these courses are not FAO courses. These courses are designed jointly with a number of partners. For example, the ones I was mentioning about crop improvement and pre-breeding, we have developed them with the crop trust. I don't know if you know about it, Rodrigo, together with CIMIT, with CIAT, and with a number of other. And I think that by adopting not only a collaborative approach in designing these resources, but also on focusing on what is the change that we want to see, what are the professional profiles that we are targeting, what are the specific competences that these people need to have to basically make this change. So I think that I go back to the collaborative approach, because really I think that each of us have only are very focused on our way of seeing things, and when we use these collaborative approaches to design things together, I think that they are more successful and they provide a more a wider view, basically. And also, what I was wondering, listening to all of you guys, I was wondering if I mean, I can see this as really being, it could be scaled up easily in Europe, but then I was wondering, do you think these is applicable also in, I mean, in regions in Africa which are still based on traditional methods, or in Latin America, in Andine regions? I mean, is this, in your opinion, scalable, or do you think the context is really also extremely relevant? And sometimes maybe if some of these regions are still based on traditional and cultural methods and practices, is it really useful? I don't know. I mean, I'm just wondering.
I think Ian, you should answer this.
Who?
Sure, Christine, it's a great question. It's a very important one. I mean, and I think especially relevant for the work that you're doing. I mean, I've been involved in controlled environment agriculture projects in West Africa, Central America, and South Pacific, as an example. And in each of those cases, you know, and World Bank funded projects as well. For example, the TVET schools, et cetera, really problem solving, bringing engineers and technologists together to problem solve, to address issues of grid, right? How do we build a greenhouse or in controlled environments that are relevant to a tropical climate with those unique challenges? How do we decentralize the food, the feed supply to aquaculture through insect farming, for example, where there are supply chain challenges? And how to do it, you know, when you may only have, if you're lucky, 4 hours of energy on the grid a day. You know, so I would just say that in many areas we're looking at simplifying the inputs and really localizing, decentralizing the supply chains. It's a very exciting topic, and there are a growing number of companies and organizations that are really focusing on those very tangible areas where these methods can bring immediate efficiencies and resiliency to those local supply chains. So that's a big topic, but there are a number of very successful projects that we'd be happy to also, you know, work with you and your team to identify, showcase, and see how they could be replicated as well, always hand in hand with those skills-based training to make sure that there's longevity in the projects.
I would just like to complement another interesting vision, because you know, in most of the areas that where we work, where we support conservation efforts, are actually in the global south. So of course a lot in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And when it comes to conservation, there are also challenges related to energy consumption and cost. It is easy to safeguard crops or plants that produce seeds, that have seed varietals. You just need 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's basically it. But for example, I come from Peru. Peru has more than 3,500 varieties of potato. You cannot safeguard potatoes through seeds. Potato doesn't produce seeds. You actually need to do cryo preservation, which is extremely costly, liquid nitrogen and state-of-the-art facilities, but you can also safeguard them in the field. And there are important conservation efforts going on in Peru, similar efforts in coconut, for example, in the Pacific region. But the issue is, you know, climate is changing rapidly, and it's every year it's costlier and costlier to actually safeguard this varieties of potatoes in the field. So potentially through CEA, you could install in like local seed banks where you could not only produce potatoes in a controlled environment, but also safeguard them and safeguard the different varietals through CEA. So that's an angle where we could actually fuse the conservation efforts and CEA and actually reduce costs for vulnerable populations globally.
Well, I really want to thank you guys for this really taking the discussion further. And, you know, we're at time, running at time, pretty much. I mean, obviously, I think we could add another half an hour easily, or even, you know, more. But, you know, the plan is to keep on doing these panel discussions. This is number 2. There will be a number 3. I'll keep you all posted. One of the major outcomes of this particular panel is that we will file a policy action plan, which Future Food Institute and FarmTech Society has prepared. And that will be obviously open for feedback, and a wider audience should feel very free to engage with this, as we want to evolve into a very tangible, you know, discussion as a solution provider in this big challenge of increasing biodiversity in agriculture. So I want to thank you very much, all of you, the panelists, also the audiences, for your patience staying with us and engaging with us. And with just also thanking the back team, also Mark Fowler, Matteo, Martina, and Elena, who's really helped in the past weeks. Also Clement, very instrumental in putting this all together. And the call moderators, thank you again. Fantastic. We are really, I think we're making progress here. And also European Commission, Alexa, really appreciate that you were here. And also Isabel, thank you so much. And happy Friday. So please enjoy your long weekend, and we will reconvene and hear from each other and move on with this solution finding for this topic. Thank you very much, and looking forward to see all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.